What would you do when you were trapped inside a murder castle and being chased by an insane serial killer waiting to get his hands on you? Well, let's find out. It's 1893, and Chicago is a bustling metropolis, hosting the world's Columbian Exposition, a fair celebrating the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the New World. The fair drew millions of visitors, and while looking for a place to stay during these festive times, some of them set foot in the World's Fair Hotel, now known as the Murder Castle of H.H. Holmes, America's first serial killer. Henry Howard Holmes was born on May 16, 1861, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, as Herman Webster Mudgett. In 1886, at the age of 25, Holmes moved to Chicago and began working at a pharmacy in the Englewood neighborhood. A year later, in 1887, Holmes acquired a lot across the street from the pharmacy. This would be the future site of his infamous castle. The construction of the Murder Castle was a masterclass in deception. Holmes constantly hired and fired builders, ensuring that only he understood the true blueprint of the building. The second floor of the hotel was a crowded mess of narrow halls without windows that were set at odd angles. Many of these halls were meant to lead Holmes's victims to their deaths. Holmes's ultimate goal was to trick, trap, and mislead his guests, making it impossible for them to find their way back out. The completion of the castle in 1893 coincided with the opening of the World's Fair. Officially, it was a hotel, capitalizing on the upcoming influx of tourists. Unofficially, it was a meticulously designed trap, built not for comfort but for slaughter. One of the things Holmes had designed was a network of gas pipes hidden in the floors and walls. These pipes were linked to valves in Holmes's own room, which meant that he could flood gas into the rooms of his sleeping guests at any time, killing them slowly and quietly by suffocation. In the middle of the second floor, there was a room that was totally sealed. The only way in was a trapdoor in the ceiling corner. When a guest would stand on the trapdoor, it would open and send them on a final descent into a pitch-black room. Since the trapdoor only opened from the outside, there was no way to get out. Once stuck inside the dark and empty room, the unfortunate guest would slowly die of starvation. In some of the hotel rooms there were iron walls. Most of the time, the iron walls were there to keep out noise, but in one room particularly, they were used for something much worse. This iron-lined secret room contained gas pipes that could be used as blowtorches, which Holmes could control from his bedroom. Once a guest was trapped in this room, Holmes could burn them alive by turning on the blowtorch. On the third floor of the Murder Castle, Holmes had built a soundproof vault. The vault was lined with steel and had a small gas flame inside to provide some light. When a guest or employee entered the vault, Holmes would lock the door and put out the gas flame by blowing on any of the air pipes that were connected to the vault. Anyone who was stuck inside would quickly suffocate. Later on, police would find claw marks on the vault walls from victims trying to scratch their way out. Many of Holmes's gadgets were meant to kill his victims from afar, but one was saved for a more direct way of murder. A whole room in the Murder Castle was named the Hanging Chamber. Holmes would use chloroform to put his victims to sleep after following them around and isolating them in his network of secret passageways. Then he dragged them back to the secret room where they were hanged. But how did Holmes get rid of the dead bodies? All over the hotel there were chutes down to the basement. Theoretically, these were designed for laundry, but in reality, Holmes used them to dispose of the bodies. Why carry dead weight down the stairs if you don't have to? The basement was also well equipped. It was essentially a morgue on steroids, complete with massive furnaces, pits of quicklime and caustic acid, and instruments for cutting up bodies, all to make sure the bodies would disappear forever. Sadly, some of his victims were not dead yet once they arrived in the basement. Then they had to deal with a particularly nasty torture device, a stretching rack. Holmes would perform a test on them which he called the elasticity determinator. During this test, his victims were slowly bent and stretched on the rack until all their bones were broken. Other victims would end up on Holmes' operating table. With the help of different surgical tools and poisons, Holmes cut up the bodies or performed medical tests on them. After taking out their organs and cleaning the skin that was still on the skeletons, he sold them as anatomical models to unknowing doctors in medical schools. On November 17, 1894, Holmes was arrested in Boston. He stood trial in Philadelphia, and less than a year later, in October 1895, his fate was sealed. As Holmes faced the gallows, the world pondered the number of his victims. While Holmes confessed to 27 murders, the total amount of victims is estimated between 20 and 100, with some historians claiming a number beyond 200. On May 7, 1896, Holmes was hanged at Moyamensing Prison. Instead of dying instantly, Holmes's neck did not break, and he died very slowly, his body twitching for more than 15 minutes before he was pronounced dead. The murder castle itself was damaged in a fire in 1895 and was eventually demolished in 1938. This was it for today's video. So, what would you have done when you were trapped inside Holmes's castle? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. If this story caught your interest, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories about serial killers worldwide. Until next time, and stay safe.